She was sold to the public as a walking punchline, a manufactured platinum figure engineered for maximum spectacle. Behind the manufactured image was a woman with a documented genius-level intelligence, 5 languages, and a classically trained musician's discipline. Her life ended abruptly on a dark highway in 1967, and the myth that grew around her death obscured the real woman as thoroughly as her image had in life. This is the documented story of who Jayne Mansfield actually was. Vera Jayne Palmer was born in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania on April 19, 1933. Her father, Herbert Palmer, died of a sudden heart attack in 1936 when she was just 3 years old. Seeking a fresh start, her mother, Vera, remarried sales engineer Harry Piers, and the family settled in Dallas, Texas in 1939. At Highland Park High School, she balanced academic work with private lessons in violin and piano. Her sights, however, were firmly set on performance. In May 1950, at age 17, she eloped with Paul Mansfield, giving birth to her daughter, Jane Marie, that November. Yet teenage motherhood did not stall her academic or artistic drive. She enrolled at the University of Texas, maintaining a better than a B+ average, and later completed a summer term at UCLA. She also returned to Dallas to study drama under Baruch Lumet at Southern Methodist University. Though she never completed a degree, her academic pursuit was rigorous. Between classes, she entered local beauty contests, performed in Dallas theater, and appeared on early local television. By late 1954, she had convinced her husband to move to Los Angeles. She did not arrive in Hollywood as an accidental discovery or a passive dreamer. She arrived with a sharp intellect, classical training, and a deliberate, self-directed plan to conquer an industry that was already actively looking for its next big spectacle. In 1955, 20th Century Fox signed the newly arrived actress to a contract, positioning her as a direct, reliable, commercial alternative to the often unpredictable Marilyn Monroe. The studio ordered her naturally brown hair bleached to a striking uniform platinum shade, establishing a visual trademark designed to capture the post-war public's appetite for bombshells. This was not a passive makeover. Mansfield actively collaborated with Fox's publicity machine, treating fame as a highly measurable science. In 1956, she purchased a Mediterranean-style mansion in the Hollywood Hills and had the entire property painted pink, creating an instant landmark that kept newspaper photographers and fan magazines returning for weekly photo shoots. She understood that the press required constant novelty. Strategic wardrobe mishaps at film premieres and manufactured feuds with rival contract players like Mamie Van Doren were executed to guarantee newspaper space. The campaign reached its peak in April 1957 at Romanoff's dinner hosted for Italian star Sophia Loren. Mansfield arrived in a daringly low-cut gown, orchestrating a famous side-eye photograph with Loren that was syndicated globally within days. These calculated tactics generated unparalleled attention, but they also established a rigid public expectation. The very caricature she engineered to secure her career was beginning to dictate the roles she could play, transforming a profitable business instrument into a permanent personal confinement. In a 1956 interview with the Los Angeles Times, Mansfield publicly claimed an IQ of 163. While this figure became a permanent fixture of her biography, no surviving psychometric record, test name, or official administrator exists to verify it. Modern accounts frequently repeat this genius-level score alongside claims that she spoke 5 languages fluently. Yet the archival evidence paints a more realistic picture of her actual linguistic skills. A recorded German television interview from October 1957 confirms she could speak conversational German. Conversely, a 1962 French-Canadian television appearance reveals her struggling with basic phrases, stating she had only studied French for 2 weeks. Her reported study of Italian did not begin until 1963, and while school records confirm Spanish classes, true multilingual mastery remains an unverified popular superlative. Her musical capabilities, however, rest on documented performance. Childhood training in piano and violin developed a rigorous artistic discipline. On May 26, 1957, she performed Vivaldi's Violin Concerto No. 6 in a minor on The Ed Sullivan Show, revealing a technical proficiency that required years of serious practice. These distinctions matter. There is a vast gulf between verified musical performance, conversational foreign language ability, and an unproven test score. Mansfield understood this gap. She recognized that the cartoonish persona she presented to the world was a highly profitable product, complaining to reporters that the public was only interested in her physical measurements while ignoring her actual mind. On October 13, 1955, she turned her physical assets into a sharp theatrical weapon, debuting on Broadway as Rita Marlowe in the satirical comedy Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter? Her performance, which directly parodied the very blonde archetype she was constructing, won her a Theatre World Award and ran for over 400 performances. She rejected the role of a passive caricature, using precise comic timing and a highly deliberate self-awareness to mock the public's obsession with sex symbols while simultaneously feeding their appetite. This theatrical triumph secured her transition to cinema, leading to her 1956 screen breakthrough in the musical comedy The Girl Can't Help It. Cast alongside Tom Ewell and a roster of rock and roll pioneers, she proved that her screen presence could carry a major Hollywood release. By 1957, her career reached its absolute peak. She reprised her stage role in the film adaptation of Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, earned critical praise for her dramatic instincts in the road movie The Wayward Bus, and showed her comedic range opposite Cary Grant in Kiss Them For Me. During these peak years, international newspapers and fan magazines frequently described her as one of the most photographed women in the world, a contemporary cultural claim reflecting her sheer media ubiquity rather than any measurable metric. This constant global exposure, coupled with a Golden Globe win as a rising star, established her as a major box office force. Yet this rapid ascent contained a silent, structural trap. The Hollywood studios that celebrated her self-aware humor were only willing to buy the caricature she had engineered. Her professional success became entirely dependent on a hyper-sexualized, cartoonish persona that left no room for dramatic growth, effectively securing her stardom at the cost of her artistic range. By the turn of the decade, the commercial novelty of that caricature began to fade. The studio system was fracturing, and 20th Century Fox faced shrinking profits, which directly squeezed Mansfield's professional options. Her contract no longer guaranteed top-tier roles. Instead, executives offered scripts that merely recycled her established blonde caricature, leading to frequent disputes over roles and scripts. Mansfield fought to break out of this loop, demanding serious roles that matched her intellectual and performance capabilities. But the industry remained rigid. To Hollywood executives and the public, she was a visual commodity, not a dramatic actress. A bitter 1964 contract dispute with Fox eventually led to a formal break with the studio, ending her security as a contract player. Without major studio backing, her opportunities contracted. She was forced to accept lower-budget independent films and lesser foreign productions. To replace her thinning film offers, she booked her first nightclub engagements in Las Vegas and Miami. These live performances kept her financially solvent, but they also reinforced the very stereotype she wanted to escape. The decline was structural. The recognizable image that had opened doors had hardened into inescapable typecasting, turning her engineered spectacle into a permanent trap. Vera Jayne Palmer's private life was quickly absorbed into her public brand, with her domestic world serving as constant material for the press. Her first marriage to Paul Mansfield ended in divorce in 1958, leaving her as a single mother to her eldest daughter, Jayne Marie. That same year, she married bodybuilder Mickey Hargitay, a union that produced 3 children, Miklos in 1958, Zoltan in 1960, and Mariska in 1964. Her third marriage to filmmaker Matt Cimber in 1964 led to the birth of her 5th child, Antonio, in 1965. Balancing the responsibilities of 5 young children with a grueling, self-funded schedule of nightclub tours and low-budget film shoots was a constant physical demand. The press did not treat her motherhood as a private matter. Instead, journalists documented her separations, divorces, and custody disputes with the same sensationalism they applied to her movie career. This constant exposure kept her in the headlines during her career decline, but it turned her family life into consumer entertainment. For Mansfield, the relentless pressure to sustain her public image meant that personal privacy became the highest cost of her fame. By 1965, the era of major studio security had vanished, replaced by the daily grind of an independent touring entertainer. To support her 5 children and fund her high overhead, Jayne Mansfield turned her career into a relentless pursuit of live engagements. This was a grueling, self-funded road circuit that traded Hollywood prestige for immediate cash flow. Her schedule became a dizzying itinerary of nightclub reviews, dinner theaters, and personal appearances. She headlined shows in Las Vegas, the Catskills, and Miami, billed as a glamorous singer and instrumentalist. Despite the lack of studio backing, she still drew crowds through the sheer force of her established persona. Audiences crowded into smoke-filled rooms to see the screen star up close, and she delivered, singing and playing her violin with professional consistency. The work grew increasingly varied and exhausting. She accepted bookings at county fairs, beauty pageants, and retail store openings, traveling with trunk loads of pink wardrobe and publicity photos. This was active, demanding labor, not a quiet retreat. Between her stage dates, she took what film work she could find, which largely consisted of low-budget independent features. In 1967, she made her final theatrical film appearance, playing a brief, self-parodying cameo in the studio comedy A Guide for the Married Man. Her life was defined by this constant mobility. She spent weeks traveling from one venue to the next, coordinating bookings, managing her travel arrangements, and moving her family from city to city. She was a working mother running a small business on the road, driven by the necessity of the next contract, constantly traveling between professional commitments with no time to rest. In the early hours of June 29, 1967, those relentless road demands converged on a dark stretch of U.S. Highway 90 outside New Orleans. Mansfield was traveling between engagements, making a late-night transit from a nightclub appearance in Biloxi, Mississippi, toward a midday television broadcast scheduled for the next day. Inside the vehicle, 3 adults occupied the front seat: Mansfield, her lawyer Sam Brody, and a driver. Sleeping in the rear seat were 3 young children. At approximately 2:15 a.m., the highway was obscured by a dense combination of heavy fog and chemical mist from a nearby mosquito-spraying truck. Traveling through the haze, the vehicle struck the rear of a slow-moving tractor-trailer. The impact was immediate and catastrophic, crushing the front half of the car as it slid beneath the trailer's frame. The 3 adults in the front seat died instantly from the force of the collision. In the rear of the vehicle, the 3 children survived, escaping the wreckage with only minor physical injuries. With that sudden impact, Jayne Mansfield's life ended at the age of 34. She died at the end of a long night's drive on a desolate highway, far from the bright lights and manufactured glamour of the Hollywood studios that had once defined her. The suddenness of the tragedy immediately gave rise to a gruesome, persistent rumor that has overshadowed the reality of the crash for decades. Popular accounts widely claim that Mansfield was decapitated. This claim is false. Undertaker Jim Roberts, who prepared her body, later confirmed that her head was entirely intact. The myth began in the immediate, chaotic aftermath of the collision. Photographers captured images of her blonde wig thrown from the car and tangled in the crushed windshield, which onlookers and reporters misinterpreted as her actual hair. This distorted perspective, combined with the extreme damage to the vehicle's roof, fueled sensational tabloid headlines. Over the years, television documentaries and internet forums repeated the story, reducing her final moments to a horrific spectacle and repeating the same pattern of prioritizing image over reality that had dominated her life. Yet the catastrophe left a concrete, life-saving legacy. The collision highlighted the extreme danger of under-ride crashes, where a smaller passenger vehicle slides directly beneath the bed of a larger commercial truck. While Mansfield's crash did not single-handedly write new legislation, it forced a major push for change. It focused national attention on highway safety, contributing to decades of advocacy that eventually led to federal requirements for rear under-ride guards, metal steel barriers designed to prevent cars from wedging beneath trailers. In death, her name became permanently linked to a physical shield on the highway, a quiet protector for millions of drivers who would never know her story. Behind the hyper-sexualized caricature lay a highly organized career managed by a woman who viewed fame as a deliberate business. Her life was defined by a rigorous, lifelong discipline, stretching from her early childhood, classical music training, and college dramatic studies to the grueling physical demands of sustaining a touring stage career to support her 5 children. She operated as a shrewd architect of her own fame, balancing her sharp personal agency against a rigid studio system that happily bought the bombshell performance, but actively refused to let her outgrow it. That resilience survived her, carried forward by her children, including her daughter Mariska Hargitay's decades-long success as an actress in her own right. In the end, the industry she conquered proved unable to accommodate her actual intellectual depth. The vast distance between the manufactured spectacle of Jayne Mansfield and the disciplined, ambitious reality of Vera Jayne Palmer remains the final measure of what the public missed. Today, the steel barriers on the backs of trucks offer silent, life-saving protection to millions who will never know her name. But the real tragedy remains our ongoing appetite for the caricature over the creator. We still let the noise of celebrity drown out the quiet brilliance of the human behind it. What do you think of Jayne's enduring legacy? Share your thoughts below.
Call it harsh, call it honest, but there's something brutally satisfying about watching the studio that broke her finally lose control. Judy Garland's downfall hit every ugly note they tried to hide. MGM finds a teen talent. In 1935, MGM signed a 13-year-old girl from Minnesota named Frances Gumm. She had big eyes, a big voice, and stage experience with her 2 older sisters. But what the studio saw was someone they could mold. First step, a name change. Frances became Judy Garland. She didn't look like other stars, too short, face too round, but her voice unmatched. Executives called it a phenomenon. She could belt like a grown-up even though she was barely a teen. That voice got her into the room, but the pressure started right away. Studio head Louis B. Mayer thought she needed fixing. Her teeth were capped, her hairline adjusted. She was put on a strict diet, told to lose weight, then weighed in regularly. If she gained, she heard about it loudly. One producer reportedly called her the fat little pig with pigtails. And she was only 14. MGM didn't waste time. They tossed her into the studio's musical machine, pairing her with Mickey Rooney for a series of low-budget backyard musicals. The first big one, Thoroughbreds Don't Cry, came out in 1937. More followed Love Finds, Andy Hardy, Babes in Arms, and Strike Up the Band. Rooney played the fast-talking boy next door. Garland played the sweet girl with the golden voice. She became a fan favorite fast. But behind the camera, it wasn't so sweet. Judy was working 6-day weeks with studio tutors squeezed between costume fittings, music rehearsals, and dance numbers. Lunches were just soup and black coffee. She was still a kid, but there was no room to act like one. They also started giving her pep pills, small doses of amphetamines to keep her going through long days, then barbiturates at night to sleep. That mix would become a lifelong problem. But back then, it was just what the studio did. By 1938, she was already a household name, but she hadn't even had a lead role yet. That came next, and it would change everything. Wizard of Oz, Studio Control. At 16, Judy Garland was cast as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. The role made her famous, but what it did to her behind the scenes was anything but magical. The costume team stuffed her into corsets to make her look younger and thinner. She wore a tight blue dress and a heavy wig that was later swapped for braided pigtails. They even tried fake noses. Makeup artists changed her face to fit a made-up version of Midwestern cute. The shooting schedule was brutal. Call time started before sunrise. Some days, she worked 18 hours straight. The lights on set were so hot that extras fainted. Judy had to stay sharp through singing, dancing, and retakes, often without rest. To keep her awake, she was given more stimulants. To sleep, she got sedatives. No doctor explained the side effects. It was just how things worked at MGM. She wasn't alone. Most young actors got the same treatment, but Judy was in almost every scene. The pressure was nonstop. She started biting her nails down to the skin. Her weight dropped even more. Crew members joked she was held together with pins. Still, the camera loved her. When The Wizard of Oz was released in 1939, critics praised her performance. Over the Rainbow became her signature. It won an Oscar for Best Original Song. She didn't win anything herself, but audiences fell in love with her voice, her face, her warmth. She became America's sweetheart overnight, but no one saw how much she was hurting. MGM didn't let her attend the premiere in most cities. They needed her filming the next picture. Even when she was named an honorary Oscar winner that year, it came with a catch. She shared the stage with Mickey Rooney. Judy smiled through it. She always did. Early marriages and public strain. Judy was 19 when she married composer David Rose in 1941. MGM wasn't thrilled. Executives thought marriage would ruin her girl-next-door image, but she pushed back. She was tired of being treated like a child. Rose was 12 years older. They kept the wedding low-key, but word still got out. She became pregnant soon after the wedding. Studio heads told her the timing was bad for business. Within weeks, the pregnancy was quietly ended. It wasn't a choice Judy made freely. She later said she never forgot it. The marriage didn't last. David Rose worked long hours. Judy worked longer. They rarely saw each other. By 1944, it was over. She tried to stay focused on her films. Meet Me in St. Louis was a hit in 1944, especially the number Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Audiences loved it. But on set, Judy had trouble showing up. Her mood shifted fast. Her weight kept dropping. She was still taking the same studio-issued pills, one to wake up, one to sleep. She also fell hard for director Vincente Minnelli during filming. He saw her as more than a teenage icon. She liked that. The two started dating soon after the movie wrapped. Judy's image was changing. She was no longer just the sweet girl with the soft voice. The press began reporting on her love life, her missed shoots, her unpredictable moods. MGM tried to spin it, but the cracks were showing. Still, she kept performing. She filmed The Clock and The Harvey Girls, even as her personal life got messier. Her voice stayed strong, but she often needed retakes. Crew members said she would cry between scenes, then smile for the camera. By the time she married Minnelli in 1945, she was exhausted but hopeful. They had a daughter, Liza, in 1946. It seemed like a fresh start, breaking point behind the scenes. Years of overwork, diet pills, and pressure caught up with her. She was 25, but already seen as difficult in the industry. Her moods were erratic. Her energy swung wildly. MGM noticed. That year, she was cast in The Pirate with Gene Kelly. On paper, it was a bold, colorful musical. Off camera, it was a mess. Judy often skipped rehearsals. Some days, she didn't show up at all. When she did, she struggled to get through scenes. Kelly later said he tried to help but didn't know how. She needed rest, not more work. During filming, she disappeared for days. The studio sent people to find her. Rumors spread. Some said she was sick. Others whispered she'd had a breakdown. The truth wasn't simple, but she was clearly unwell. MGM called in psychiatrists, but the treatment was rushed. They needed her back on set. She eventually finished the movie, but barely. Reviews were mixed. The film flopped. MGM blamed her. Next came Easter Parade with Fred Astaire. It should have been easy, as Judy had worked with Astaire before, but her health was worse. She fainted on set more than once. Her weight dropped again. She started seeing more doctors and was briefly hospitalized. The studio paused production, then brought her back too soon. At one point, she was found unresponsive in her dressing room. Reports said it was exhaustion. Privately, the studio was panicking. She was still a star, but now a risky one. In public, fans saw her smiling at premieres. In private, she was losing control. Friends later said she would go from cheerful to withdrawn in minutes. The pills didn't help anymore. They just blurred everything. By the time MGM offered her the lead in Annie Get Your Gun, many saw it as a test. Could she hold it together? She tried. She rehearsed. She even filmed a few numbers. But she couldn't finish. The studio let her go from the project. It was a public failure. Fired from MGM at 28. At 28, Judy Garland was dropped by MGM. The same studio that made her a star now saw her as a liability. It happened during the filming of Royal Wedding. Judy was cast opposite Fred Astaire after June Allison dropped out, but the same problems followed her. She missed rehearsals. She arrived late or not at all. On days she did show up, she looked drained and shaky. Astaire tried to be patient. MGM wasn't. She was removed from the film after only a few weeks. Jayne Powell replaced her. The press found out fast. Headlines read, "Judy Garland dropped again." This time, the studio didn't deny it. MGM had spent 15 years controlling her every move, her clothes, weight, sleep, even her relationships. Now they washed their hands of her completely. Her contract was canceled, quietly, without ceremony. It wasn't just a job loss. It was a full break. Judy had grown up on MGM lots. She'd made over 20 films there, but the studio was changing. Big musicals were fading. New stars were cheaper, less trouble, and Judy, with her hospital stays and missed shoots, had become too expensive. She didn't take the news well. Friends said she was heartbroken. At first, she tried to act unfazed. She said she'd go independent, make her own way. But inside, she was scared. Without MGM, she had no structure, no safety net. She spent time in and out of clinics. Doctors gave her new prescriptions. None of them worked. Her mental health dipped. She stayed indoors, avoided the press, and barely saw friends. The public didn't see it all right away. Her name still had power, but within the industry, doors began to close. Studios hesitated. Producers passed. Insurance companies wouldn't cover her. Live shows sparked new hope. Judy Garland didn't stay down for long. By 1951, she was back, but not in movies. This time, it was live on stage. And it worked. She booked a comeback tour, starting with the London Palladium. Tickets sold out, fans lined up around the block, critics weren't sure what to expect. But when she walked on stage, thin and trembling, then opened her mouth to sing, everything changed. The voice was still there. From London, she went straight to New York for a run at the Palace Theater. The place was packed every night. The audience stood before she even sang a note. One critic called it the greatest comeback in showbiz history. Judy called it her rebirth. This wasn't the polished Judy of the MGM years. She looked older. Her dresses were simple. Her hair was short. But when she sang "The Man That Got Away," she didn't just hit the notes, she poured everything into them. The crowd knew it wasn't an act. She meant it. She told jokes between songs, teased the band, talked to the audience like they were old friends. It wasn't just a concert. It was a confession. People felt close to her. It was messy. And it was magic. Money came in fast. So did offers, television spots, magazine features, talk of a movie deal. For the first time in years, she was selling out and not just surviving. But the pressure returned just as quickly. Every city, every crowd, every hotel room brought more stress. Her team tried to keep her grounded. Some nights she soared. Other nights she cracked. Her weight went up and down. The pills never left. In 1952, she collapsed in her dressing room after a show in Boston. Doctors said it was exhaustion. She canceled a string of performances. Promoters started asking questions. Could she really keep this up? Even so, she pushed forward. These shows proved she could still draw a crowd, still deliver a knockout performance. MGM was gone. The movie sets were behind her. But on stage, with a spotlight and a microphone, Judy Garland still had power, and for now, she was using every last bit of it. Television debut faces network pushback. By the early 1960s, Judy Garland was ready for another big move: television. In 1963, The Judy Garland Show premiered on CBS. It was her first time hosting a weekly program. The network called it a variety show, but it was really a gamble. Each episode had singing, guest stars, and comedy bits. Judy opened most nights with a song, then chatted with famous friends like Barbra Streisand, Mickey Rooney, and Mel Torme. Her daughter, Liza, even showed up. On paper, it looked like a hit. But behind the scenes, things were rocky. CBS kept changing producers. The time slot was tough, directly against Bonanza, which dominated Sunday nights. Ratings dropped fast. Executives got nervous. Judy didn't help. She showed up late. Rehearsals ran long. Some weeks, she looked tired and worn down. Other times, she was sharp, funny, and in full control. You never knew which version you'd get. The crew started calling it the Judy Lottery. She clashed with producers over scripts, camera angles, even the lighting. She wanted more music, less comedy. The network disagreed. They wanted safe, clean laughs. Judy wanted something real. Neither side backed down. By mid-season, CBS cut the budget. Writers were replaced. Musical numbers were trimmed. Judy felt boxed in. She started missing more meetings, more tapings. Rumors swirled that the show wouldn't make it. Still, there were moments of brilliance. Her duet with Barbra Streisand became an instant classic. Her performance of The Battle Hymn of the Republic, taped after JFK's death, brought audiences to tears.
Let us die to make men free.
Even critics admitted the highs were unforgettable. But it wasn't enough. After just one season, the show was canceled. CBS lost money. Judy was blamed. She walked away, exhausted and angry. Worse, the show had drained her financially. She owed money to managers, agents, and the IRS. Concert bookings slowed. Her health dipped again. Financial woes and touring struggles. The canceled television show left Judy Garland in debt. She owed the IRS hundreds of thousands in back taxes. She lost her home in Los Angeles, then her New York apartment. At one point, she was staying in hotels she couldn't afford, writing checks that bounced. To stay afloat, she returned to the road. Small venues, short contracts, one-nighters. The tours were small, the travel bare bones. She carried a suitcase, a handful of gowns, and the weight of her name. Sometimes that was enough. But the shows weren't always smooth. Her voice had changed. Years of stress and substance use took a toll. Some nights, she hit every note. Other nights, she struggled to finish songs. She'd forget lyrics or show up late, sometimes by hours. A few times, she didn't show up at all. In Australia, it got ugly. She was booked for a concert in Melbourne in 1964. The crowd waited over an hour. When she finally walked on stage, she looked thin and confused. She sang only a few songs, then stopped mid-performance. The audience turned on her, shouting, booing, throwing things. She fled the stage in tears. The press called it a disaster. Headlines blamed her. Promoters canceled future dates. Her team said she was sick. Most people didn't believe it. She kept working anyway. Casinos, nightclubs, dinner theaters, anywhere that would have her. But the pay was lower. The crowds were smaller. She was no longer the headliner, just a fading star trying to stay visible. Her wardrobe was falling apart. She pawned jewelry, sold personal items, even tried to sell the rights to her life story, but there were no takers. Friends lent her money, but it never lasted. She briefly reunited with her daughter Liza for a few performances. The shows were well received, but Judy could barely keep up. Liza said later that she worried her mother wouldn't make it through each night. By the end of 1967, Judy was broke, exhausted, and nearly out of options. She could still draw attention, but she couldn't control what came with it. The applause never fully stopped, but the safety net was long gone. Last tour, new marriage. In early 1969, Judy Garland got married for the 5th time. Her new husband was Mickey Deans, a nightclub manager 12 years younger. They met a few years earlier when he delivered pills to her hotel room. The marriage came fast, and so did the headlines. Some called him an opportunist. Others hoped he might help stabilize her life. They moved to London. Judy had been performing there off and on since the early 52nd, and she still had fans. She booked a short series of shows at the Talk of the Town nightclub. It was a small venue, but it was steady work. She needed the cash. Her appearance shocked people. She weighed under 100 pounds. Her face looked hollow. But the crowd still stood when she stepped on stage. When she could sing, she sang with fire. But those nights were rare. Most nights were tense. She forgot lyrics, lost timing, rambled between songs. One night, she cried mid-performance. Another night, she didn't show up until nearly midnight. Still, people kept buying tickets. Some came out of loyalty, others out of curiosity. Off stage, things were worse. Her health was declining fast. She struggled to eat. She barely slept. She kept switching medications. Friends said she was paranoid. She thought people were following her. She'd move from hotel to hotel without notice. Mickey Deans tried to book more gigs, but most promoters said no. Too risky, too unpredictable. The money ran out quickly. They bounced between borrowed flats and cheap hotels. Judy tried to appear on talk shows, but most offers were pulled at the last minute. She still believed things might turn around. She talked about recording a new album, making another film, writing her memoir, but those plans stayed in notebooks. In the end, the London shows slipped by with little fanfare. She performed to half-filled rooms, her voice unsteady, the energy fading night after night. By June, Judy was barely holding on. She was tired, frail, and nearly invisible in the industry she once ruled. She was only 47, but looked much older. The comeback she always chased never came. And the world around her had already moved on. A sudden ending in London. On the 22nd of June, 1969, Judy Garland was found unresponsive in her rented home in London. She had gone into the bathroom and didn't come out. Mickey Deans called for help, but it was too late. She was pronounced dead early that morning. She was 47 years old. The official cause was ruled an accidental overdose of barbiturates. No foul play, no dramatic scene, just years of exhaustion, pressure, and medication catching up with her. She had been taking sleeping pills for years, prescribed, legal, and always close by. The coroner said the dose built up over time. Her body simply gave out. News of her death broke fast. Fans around the world were stunned. Even those who had watched her decline didn't expect it to end like this. In New York, a crowd gathered outside the Stonewall Inn the same week, a moment that would later become historic. Some who were there said Judy's passing added to the emotions that night. Back in London, her body was flown home to New York. Thousands came to her funeral. People lined the streets. Some held photos. Others brought yellow roses, her favorite. It was a quiet service, private but packed. Her 3 children, including Liza Minnelli, stood in the front row. For decades, Judy Garland had been a symbol of magic and music, but in the end, she had no mansion, no major deals, and no retirement. She left behind debts, heartbreak, and a long paper trail of broken contracts. Still, people remembered her voice. Not just over the rainbow, but all of it. The rawness, the power, the way she sang like she was holding on for dear life. There were no tributes on late-night television, no televised special, just newsreels and newspaper columns. Hollywood didn't rush to celebrate her. They had moved on. But fans didn't forget. Her records sold out that week. Her films aired on late-night channels again. People dug through old interviews, looking for signs, trying to figure out when it all started to go wrong. Judy Garland's downfall wasn't fast or flashy. It was slow, steady, and deeply public. And when it ended, the silence left behind said everything. She won an Oscar with a comeback and spent the next 30 years proving her critics right. Joan Crawford's worst role? Herself. Oscar high, career confusion. She won an Academy Award in 1946 for Mildred Pierce, and for a minute, it looked like she'd pulled off the ultimate comeback. She had been dropped by MGM just a few years earlier, labeled box office poison in a 1938 ad alongside other stars past their prime. But when Mildred Pierce hit, she wasn't just back, she was dominant. That win inflated her already well-known sense of control. Crawford took her pick of roles and passed on some of the best scripts of the era. One of the biggest? All About Eve. The lead part eventually went to Bette Davis, who earned critical raves and an Oscar nomination. Crawford had called the script talky. Instead, she chose safer projects like Flamingo Road, Harriet Craig, and The Damned Don't Cry. They weren't flops, but they didn't elevate her. Audiences started seeing the same performance again and again. Dramatic tears, icy glares, and monologues about betrayal. One reviewer even said she looked like she was competing with herself. Behind the scenes, directors struggled to manage her. She demanded specific lighting, insisted on rehearsing scenes long past the scheduled wrap time, and sometimes took over costume design. Makeup artists were warned not to touch her brows. One former Warner Brothers producer said, "Working with Joan wasn't just directing, it was negotiating." Her need for image control was relentless. She reportedly kept a mirror off camera during shoots to check herself between takes, and she had final say over camera angles. If the cinematographer disagreed, she'd call the studio boss directly. Publicly, she still drew headlines and packed theaters. But the freshness of Mildred Pierce was gone by the end of the decade. In 1949, the New York Times reviewed Flamingo Road and remarked, "Miss Crawford seems to be playing Miss Crawford." She wasn't evolving, she was repeating. And while she thought she was at her peak, Hollywood was quietly preparing for her decline. Queen Bee or set tyrant? By the early 1950s, Joan was still booking leading roles, but now the drama off-screen was getting just as loud as anything in the script. She starred in Sudden Fear in 1952, earning another Academy Award nomination. The film did well. Critics praised her intensity, but the moment didn't last. Behind closed doors, directors said she was becoming almost impossible to work with. She questioned blocking, changed camera setups, and would stop entire scenes mid-take if she didn't like her co-star's line reading. Things reached a boiling point during the 1955 production of Queen Bee. It was supposed to be a sharp melodrama. Instead, it turned into a lesson in survival for everyone on set. Crawford reportedly dominated every department. If she didn't like a prop, it vanished. If a supporting actress stood out too much, Joan ordered the costume department to dull her wardrobe. She was notorious for arriving on set with her own cooler, filled with vodka and Coca-Cola labeled for medicinal use. The cast and crew called it the fifth assistant director. Actress Betsy Palmer, who played the young ingenue, later recalled Crawford mocking her makeup and wardrobe in front of the crew. "She could freeze you with a look," Palmer said, "and if you cried, she liked it." Cinematographers weren't safe either. She had favorite angles and would bark orders if the lighting didn't hit the cheekbone just right. One grip reportedly said, "If the light was wrong, she didn't fix her position. She fixed you." Director Ranald McDougall, who also wrote the script, admitted she pushed for rewrites almost daily. He gave in more often than he wanted to. By the time filming wrapped, no one wanted a sequel. Crawford blamed her co-stars for the bad energy. Publicly, she smiled through press junkets and interviews. But inside the studio gates, the stories were circulating. Joan wasn't worth the chaos. Studio exit and public meltdowns. By the mid-1950s, the studio system that had built Joan Crawford's career was collapsing, and she wasn't adapting well. After Queen Bee, she signed with Columbia Pictures and made a few more films, Autumn Leaves and The Story of Esther Costello. Both were dramatic, emotional, and heavily marketed around her image. But younger stars like Audrey Hepburn and Kim Novak were taking center stage. Joan still demanded top billing. Audiences were starting to move on. Then came the real trouble. Warner Brothers let her go in 1959. After a long career with major contracts, she was now a free agent, with fewer offers and rising costs. Studios weren't interested in her rules anymore. One exec said she could sell a movie, but the price was dealing with Joan Crawford. Around the same time, public appearances started backfiring. She showed up late to a charity event in Boston, slurring words and stumbling through her speech. The press brushed it off as illness. Privately, friends knew she was drinking more heavily. She started accepting television interviews to stay visible, but they weren't doing her any favors. On one talk show, she snapped at the host for calling her former screen queen. She was visibly agitated and corrected every question. The footage didn't go viral, this was the 50s, but word spread. She'd also gained a reputation for calling journalists after bad reviews to argue, sometimes late at night. Columnists quietly stopped taking her calls. By 1960, she was a walking contradiction. She still acted like she was at the center of Hollywood, but the calls weren't coming. She hadn't had a real hit in years. And behind the glam shots in photoplay, there was a woman holding tighter and tighter to a career that was slipping through her fingers. Pepsi power plays and boardroom battles. In 1955, Joan married Alfred Steele, the president of Pepsi-Cola. He died just 4 years later, leaving her widowed, and with a new role, board member. It was supposed to be a graceful pivot. Instead, it turned into another battlefield. Joan jumped headfirst into the corporate world, attending shareholder meetings, launching publicity campaigns, and personally appearing at bottling plants. She called herself Pepsi's First Lady. Executives called her something else: disruptive. She traveled across the country doing PR events in full movie star wardrobe. Local plant managers were confused. One Pepsi exec said she'd show up dressed like it was the Oscars to tour a syrup facility. Behind the scenes, tensions built. Joan demanded to approve advertisements and even vetoed slogans she didn't like. She once refused to appear at an event because the backdrop clashed with her outfit. Her name may have brought publicity, but it came with chaos. The board quietly moved to limit her power. In 1966, they forced her into early retirement. She was told during a board meeting, no warning, no dignity. She left the building in tears, reportedly muttering that they'd betrayed her. She told the press it was her decision. It wasn't. Years later, one board member said she didn't know how to be anything but a star. That works in movies, not in business. Crawford never forgot the humiliation. She continued calling herself a Pepsi ambassador and kept attending events on her own dime, even after being pushed out. This wasn't just about soda. It was about identity. Acting offers were drying up, and the last organization that needed her just shut the door. She had money, but no real career left. She still gave interviews pretending she had scripts lined up, but insiders knew there weren't any. Family fallout and Christina's silence. By the late 1960s, the cracks in Joan Crawford's carefully crafted image weren't just professional, they were personal. And her adopted daughter Christina was at the center of it. From the outside, Joan played the role of the perfect Hollywood mother. Magazine spreads showed her decorating nurseries and posing with matching outfits. But the reality behind closed doors wasn't as polished. Joan had adopted 4 children: Christina, Christopher, and twins Kathy and Cindy. By the late 60s, she was only speaking to one of them. Christopher had been sent to a military academy, then cut off entirely. The twins were mostly out of the picture. Christina was still around, but just barely. Tension between mother and daughter was obvious during press interviews. In 1968, when Christina took a small TV role on The Secret Storm, Joan called the producers and insisted on taking over the role while her daughter recovered from an illness. She was 60, playing a 24-year-old. The audience laughed. Christina was humiliated. They stopped speaking soon after. Neighbors and staff started talking. One former housekeeper said Crawford ran the home like a barracks. Rules were strict, punishments were harsh, and affection came with conditions. Christina would later claim her mother's behavior bordered on abusive, allegations that at the time weren't public but were quietly spreading in Hollywood. In 1973, Christina was hospitalized for a ruptured ovarian tumor. Joan never visited. Friends asked why. She reportedly replied, "She made her bed." To outsiders, Crawford still appeared poised and generous. She donated to charities, gave red carpet interviews, and smiled for cameras. But behind the PR photos was a woman estranged from her children, isolated in her own home and clinging to an image that wasn't holding up anymore. The next year, she'd try to return to the screen one last time. It would not go well. Final films and career freefall. Crawford's final chapter as a working actress came in 1970, and it wasn't glamorous. She starred in Trog, a low-budget British horror movie about a prehistoric creature discovered in a cave. She played Dr. Brockton, a scientist who teaches the creature to speak and wear clothes. The costume looked like a cheap Halloween mask. The script was worse. Joan had taken the role out of desperation. Major studios weren't calling, and she needed money to maintain her lifestyle. She reportedly clashed with the director and asked for script rewrites. The production team said she drank heavily on set and kept forgetting lines. When Trog was released, critics didn't hold back. Variety called it a waste of film. Others said it looked like a parody. Joan later admitted she never saw the final cut. She told friends it was beneath her. She never made another movie after that. By now, even the fan magazines had backed off. She was no longer the subject of admiration. She was nostalgia. Young audiences didn't know her. Older ones didn't want to see her like this. In 1972, she was honored at a film retrospective. She arrived in a heavy gown and thick makeup, waving to a crowd of mostly older fans. One reporter called it a tribute wrapped in denial. She still called herself a working actress. She still told friends she had offers on the table. But no one was offering anything. Trog had done more than kill her career. It turned her into a punchline. The Queen of MGM was now remembered for a caveman movie. The photo that ended it all. By 1974, Joan Crawford wasn't taking many public appearances, but she made an exception for a charity event with Rosalind Russell. They'd both been stars in the same golden era. It seemed safe, until the photo came out. A black and white picture of Joan and Rosalind made the newspapers. It wasn't flattering. Her face was gaunt, her makeup heavy, and her eyes looked sunken. To most readers, it was just another red carpet shot. To Crawford, it was devastating. She called friends in a panic, said she looked grotesque. She reportedly cried for hours and demanded the photo be pulled from circulation. It wasn't. Editors ignored her. That was the last time she appeared in public. She canceled all future appearances, turned down interviews, refused to pose for photographers. According to close friends, she stopped looking in mirrors altogether. Her publicist later said she was terrified of being seen as old. And just like that, she vanished. There were no more red carpets, no fan meet and greets, no cameo offers. Her housekeeper reported that Crawford started wearing large sunglasses indoors and only allowed visitors in dim lighting. She turned away reporters at the door and kept curtains drawn day and night. She still answered fan mail, typed of course in perfect format, but only when the notes were properly respectful. Any letters that hinted at her age or past films were thrown out. One producer claimed she called him in 1974 asking about a role that didn't exist. She sounded hopeful, he said, and completely detached from reality. The woman who once demanded the spotlight now wouldn't even open the blinds. The Rosalind Russell photo didn't kill her career. That was already done, but it ended her last illusion, that she could still control how the world saw her. From this point on, Crawford was no longer a public figure. She was a myth hiding in plain sight. Alone in apartment 22G. She spent her final years in a modest apartment on Manhattan's Upper East Side, Unit 22G. It wasn't small, but it wasn't the mansion she used to host parties in either. She kept it spotless. Not just clean, sterile. Visitors said the smell of disinfectant hit you at the door. Furniture was arranged to perfection. White gloves were worn by cleaning staff. Not a fingerprint allowed. She still kept her vanity table, loaded with powders, creams, and fake eyelashes she didn't use anymore. She rarely wore makeup. rarely changed clothes, but the routine was still there. She had no live-in staff, just a rotating housekeeper and a nurse who came a few hours a day. She rarely took calls, and when she did, she demanded they keep it brief. Most of her old Hollywood friends had stopped calling anyway. She stayed up late watching her old movies on TV. She'd call the station sometimes to complain if they ran an ad break in the wrong place. Once, she reportedly asked them to play Humoresque at a different hour so she could sleep after. Books lined the apartment, mostly self-help, etiquette, and old fan magazines with her on the cover. She had stacks of letters, many unopened, some from Christina. She didn't answer. Meals were delivered, groceries were ordered by phone. She insisted they be left at the front desk, no direct interaction. When staff visited, she often pretended she wasn't home. The woman who once threw legendary dinner parties now ate cottage cheese and crackers alone. She edited old clippings, cut her name out of magazines and pasted them into scrapbooks. In one, she labeled herself the last star, not in irony, in full sincerity. In 1977, she gave away her beloved Shih Tzu, Princess Lotus Blossom. She told her maid she didn't want the dog to watch her decline. 3 months later, she passed away in her bedroom. No funeral, no fanfare. She left behind wigs, perfume, and a will that would ignite a firestorm. Death, will, and the final blow. Joan Crawford died on May 10, 1977, in her Manhattan apartment. She was 73. The official cause of death was a heart attack. She had complained of fatigue the night before and passed away quietly in her bedroom. Her housekeeper found her that morning. There was no drama, no dramatic exit, just silence. She'd already planned the details. No funeral, no memorial. She didn't want mourners. She had her body cremated and her ashes placed next to her last husband, Alfred Steele, at Ferncliff Cemetery. But the peace didn't last long. When her will was read, jaws dropped. She left money to charities, to loyal staff, and to a few friends. But 2 names were notably excluded: Christina and Christopher, her 2 oldest adopted children. The line in the will was cold and direct. It is my intention to make no provision herein for my son Christopher or my daughter Christina for reasons which are well known to them. It wasn't just an omission, it was a public rejection. The press picked it up immediately. Tabloids printed the line in full. Gossip columns speculated about what the reasons could be. Hollywood insiders already knew there had been tension for years, but this felt like a final slap. Christina issued a short statement. Christopher said nothing. Friends of Crawford defended her. They said the kids were ungrateful. Others weren't so sure. By cutting them out so publicly, she opened the door for what came next. And it wasn't a tribute, it was a takedown. Christina's book was already in motion. Christina Crawford didn't wait long. She had already started writing a book before Joan died. The will just lit the match. In 1978, less than a year after her mother's death, Mommy Dearest hit bookstores. The cover was simple, just Christina's name and the words, "The Story of My Mother, Joan Crawford." It sold out in days. The book alleged years of physical and emotional abuse. Christina claimed she was beaten, gaslit, and terrorized over minor mistakes. The most famous story? Wire hangers. Joan allegedly flew into a rage because Christina had used the wrong kind. The image was unforgettable and deeply damaging. Critics were split. Some believed every word, others called it exaggerated. But the public didn't care. Joan Crawford, once a symbol of elegance, was now the face of celebrity cruelty. Mommy Dearest became a cultural lightning rod. It stayed on the bestseller list for months. The backlash was fast and loud. Joan's defenders, including actresses like Myrna Loy and Douglas Fairbanks Jr., called it slander. But others came forward with their own stories. Some said they'd seen Joan slap her daughter at parties. Others recalled her coldness and control. In 1981, the book was adapted into a film starring Faye Dunaway. The performance was bold, but turned Crawford into a camp icon. It wasn't a tribute. It was a caricature. Dunaway later regretted it. Christina didn't. The book didn't just stain Joan's reputation, it rewrote it. From award-winning actress to cautionary tale, Christina never apologized for writing it. She said, "I wanted the truth out, even if people didn't like it." Joan Crawford never got to respond. She died with her version of the story intact. But in the years that followed, it wasn't her version that survived. It was Christina's. Norma Jean spent her life begging to be seen. By her mother, by the studios, by the men who said they loved her. When she finally died, no one claimed her. Not the president, not the studio. Not even her own name. Born unwanted in Los Angeles. Norma Jean Mortensen was born on the 1st of June, 1926, in Los Angeles. Her mother, Gladys Bake R., had already been divorced twice. She gave Norma Jean the last name of her second ex-husband, Mortensen, though he was not the father. The space for father on the birth certificate was left blank. Gladys worked at Consolidated Film Industries. She struggled to keep a job or a home. Just 2 weeks after giving birth, she placed the baby with a foster family, the Bolanders, in the working-class town of Hawthorne. Norma Jean stayed there for 7 years. She called her foster parents Aunt Ida and Uncle Wayne. She believed they were her real family. Then, at age 7, Gladys reappeared. She tried to reclaim her daughter, moving them into a small house in Hollywood. But it didn't last. Less than a year later, Gladys suffered a full mental breakdown. She was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and committed to the state hospital in Norwalk. Norma Jean was sent to an orphanage. The Los Angeles Orphans Home Society kept strict records. She was one of hundreds packed into dormitories. Her living conditions were clean but cold. The staff forbade affection. Some children there had no parents at all. Norma Jean had one, but she wasn't coming back. She bounced between foster homes again. Some placements were safe, some weren't. In one, she said she was assaulted by a boarder in the house. No charges were filed. At age 11, she moved in with Grace Goddard, a friend of her mother's. Grace was kind but unstable. She moved often, changed jobs, and left Norma Jean behind more than once. By 15, the girl had moved at least a dozen times. She was tired of being passed around. So when Grace's family planned to move again without her, Norma Jean made a choice. She married the boy next door. His name was James Doherty. He was 21. She was just 16. That marriage wasn't about love. It was a way out, a legal way to avoid going back into the system. Norma Jean was now someone's wife, but she was still just a teenager with no father, no mother, and no real home. Not yet. Passed around foster homes. After marrying James Doherty in 1942, Norma Jean dropped out of high school. She cooked, cleaned, and played house in a small apartment near the Lockheed Aircraft plant where Jim worked night shifts. He wanted a quiet wife. She followed the rules for a while. In 1943, he joined the Merchant Marine. When he shipped out to the South Pacific, she moved in with his mother. The setup was temporary and tense. Norma Jean was still only 17. She needed work. She found a job at Radioplane Company, a military drone factory in Burbank. She sprayed airplane parts with fire retardant and checked parachutes. It was repetitive, dirty, and loud. Then, in mid-1944, Army photographer David Conover showed up. He'd been sent by the government to capture women working for the war effort. He snapped a photo of Norma Jean holding a propeller. Then another, and another. She smiled, lit up, posed. She had something. He told her so. After that shoot, she bleached her brown hair blonde. She curled it, pinned it, and leaned into a look that the camera liked. She left the factory and signed with the Blue Book modeling agency. Within months, she was on covers Pageant, Peak, Family Circle. The work paid more than the factory. She knew how to flirt with the lens. She was good at it. But pinup modeling wasn't the goal. Film was. In 1946, she divorced Doherty, changed her name to Marilyn Monroe, and signed a contract with 20th Century Fox. It was a 6-month trial. The studio dyed her hair even lighter, taught her to walk a certain way, and ordered her to fix her teeth. She was 20. No formal training, no big roles, just the look. The studio gave her bit parts, waitresses, secretaries, dance hall girls. She was told to keep quiet, show up, and smile. She did, at first. Behind the scenes, Monroe had no financial safety net, no family she could call. She lived alone, ate canned beans, and mailed her earnings to Grace Goddard's family when she could. Her only real constant was rejection and ambition. Hollywood was a machine. She was just learning how sharp its teeth were. Factory girl to Fox contract. Her first screen test wasn't flashy, no dialogue, just a slow turn, a smile, a walk across the room. The camera liked her. That was enough for 20th Century Fox. In August 1946, she signed her first contract. Her salary was $125 a week. The studio dropped Norma Jean. A casting director suggested Marilyn. She picked Monroe from her mother's family tree. It sounded clean, marketable, American. Her first credited role came in Dangerous Years, 1947. It was small. She played a waitress. No buzz followed. Fox didn't renew her contract. For a while, she scraped by doing modeling again. Then Columbia Pictures gave her a short-term deal. Same story. No breakout, no interest. She was let go again. But she didn't leave Hollywood. Instead, she studied. She took acting lessons at the Actors Lab, read books on performance, and watched serious actors on set. She showed up even when she wasn't called. She paid attention. In 1949, she took a risky job posing nude for photographer Tom Kelly. She needed the $50 for rent. She signed the release using a fake name, hoping it would never come back to her. It would. But before that happened, she finally caught a break. In 1950, she landed minor roles in The Asphalt Jungle and All About Eve. Her screen time was short, but critics noticed. So did studio heads. She was signed again by Fox, this time with a little more power. Over the next 2 years, she appeared in 10 films. Most of the roles were light, sexy, blonde, but she was learning how to command a scene even in 3 lines. Then came Niagara in 1953. She played a femme fatale opposite Joseph Cotton. The marketing leaned hard on her body and her voice. Movie posters had her lying across a red sheet. Her walk was studied, her breathy delivery copied. She was finally a star, but not yet respected. Used by the studio system. By 1953, Marilyn was everywhere. Magazine covers, movie posters, newsreels. Gentlemen Prefer blondes sealed her image. She wasn't the lead, but she stole every scene. Dressed in hot pink, singing Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, she became a symbol, not of talent, of sex. Fox leaned in hard. They built her brand on tight dresses, high heels, and that whispery voice. She wasn't asked to act. She was asked to sparkle. Behind the scenes, she pushed back. She wanted better roles, ones with depth. She was tired of being the dumb blonde, but the studio refused. They had her under contract, and she wasn't allowed to choose her projects. She was assigned them. When she tried to negotiate, they punished her. In 1954, she refused to take another bubble-headed role in The Girl in Pink Tights. Fox suspended her. So she made a move. While still under contract, she flew to Korea with the USO and performed for over 1,000,000 American troops. Her voice cracked, the cold was brutal, but the response was wild. She came back more famous than ever. Fox lifted the suspension. She married baseball legend Joe DiMaggio that same year. Fans loved it. Hollywood didn't. They worried marriage would dull her sex appeal. They were right to worry. DiMaggio didn't like how she was portrayed either. In 1955, she took things further. She left Hollywood and moved to New York. There, she studied at the Actors Studio under Lee Strasberg. She read Chekhov, played scenes in bare rehearsal rooms, and tried to build real skills. She also started her own production company, Marilyn Monroe Productions. It was rare for an actress to do that. It forced Fox to renegotiate. She got script approval. She got a raise. She got respect, on paper at least. The studio had made a star, but they never let her grow. Marriages that silenced her. Her first marriage to Jim Doherty ended quietly. He was serving overseas. She was modeling, then acting. They grew apart. She filed for divorce in 1946. No drama, no fight. Her second marriage to Joe DiMaggio was a different story. They wed in January 1954 at San Francisco City Hall. Marilyn wore a simple brown suit. Reporters swarmed them. Fans cheered. From the outside, it looked like a dream match. America's favorite ballplayer and Hollywood's biggest star. Inside the marriage, it was tense. Joe didn't want a wife in the spotlight. He hated the way men stared at her. He wanted her to stay home, cook, and settle down. She tried to please him at first, but she was in demand. Movie roles, photo shoots, red carpets. It didn't stop. The final blow came in New York during filming for The 7-Year Itch. The scene where she stands over a subway grate, white dress blowing up, drew a crowd of hundreds. The cameras rolled. Flashbulbs popped. Joe watched from the sidelines, furious. They fought in the hotel that night, loud enough that hotel staff made a note of it. She filed for divorce 9 months after they married, citing mental cruelty. DiMaggio didn't contest it. Less than 2 years later, she married again, this time to playwright Arthur Miller. The press called them Beauty and the Brain. Marilyn wanted respect. Miller gave her that, at least at first. They married in 1956, right before she started filming The Prince and the Showgirl with Laurence Olivier. The marriage started strong. She converted to Judaism. She tried to fit into his world. But things changed fast. He wrote in his journal that he was disappointed in her. She found the note. It crushed her. By 1960, their bond had cracked. She was exhausted. He was distant. They worked together on The Misfits, a film he wrote for her. The shoot was brutal. Long days, hot desert sun, and 2 stars Monroe and co-star Clark Gable both battling personal demons. She and Miller divorced in 1961. No children, no statements, only silence. She had chased love and ended up lonelier each time. Pills, psych wards, and exile. By the early 62nd, Marilyn was tired. Her body hurt. Her mind spiraled. She had trouble sleeping, eating, even standing still. She depended on pills, mostly barbiturates, to sleep, wake up, stay calm, and keep going. She was hospitalized for exhaustion more than once, but in 1961, things took a darker turn. After her divorce from Arthur Miller, she was admitted to Payne Whitney Psychiatric Clinic in New York. She thought it would be rest and therapy. It wasn't treatment. She was locked in a padded cell, treated like a dangerous case. No visitors, no phone calls. She begged to be released. In a letter later published in Life, she wrote, "There was no empathy at Payne Whitney. It had a very bad effect. They asked me after putting me in a cell, I mean cement blocks and all, for very disturbed, depressed patients. There was no warmth or humanity." She contacted Joe DiMaggio. He flew in, demanded her release, and took her to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital instead. There, she recovered in private care. Still, the industry viewed her as unstable. In 1962, she was cast in Something's Got to Give, a romantic comedy at 20th Century Fox. From day one, the production was a mess. She missed rehearsals. She showed up late, sometimes, not at all. But she wasn't just slacking off. She was dealing with chronic illness. She had gallbladder surgery, severe sinus infections, and ongoing insomnia. Her doctor, Hyman Engelberg, kept prescribing pills. So did her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson. Different types. No coordination. The press dragged her. The studio blamed her for delays. After 30 days of shooting, Fox fired her, publicly. They replaced her with Lee Remick, then begged Marilyn to come back when Dean Martin refused to work with anyone else. She was rehired, but the damage was done. Her health was worse. Her trust in Hollywood shattered. That summer, Marilyn retreated to her home in Brentwood. Paparazzi camped outside. Old friends stopped calling. Her world had shrunk to doctors, handlers, and a housekeeper. FBI files and secret affairs. By 1962, her name had surfaced in FBI files, Secret Service memos, and government surveillance logs, not because of her films, but because of her company. She was romantically linked to President John F. Kennedy. Their connection was real. Sources close to both confirmed it. She'd visited the White House. There were phone calls. There were weekends in Palm Springs. One famous moment, she sang "Happy Birthday, Mr. President" at Madison Square Garden that May. The dress, so tight she had to be sewn into it. The performance, sultry, slow, unmistakably personal. The First Lady didn't attend. Whispers about Marilyn and JFK weren't just gossip. They triggered national security concerns. The FBI monitored her for possible influence by leftist organizations. They noted her friendships with activists, writers, and artists who were under watch during the Red Scare. Her ex-husband, Arthur Miller, had been investigated years earlier. That connection still lingered. One 1962 FBI memo flagged Monroe as a possible security risk. The concern: she might be sharing political conversations she had overheard with the president. Whether she was or not, the fear alone was enough. Things got messier. Marilyn had also been seen with Robert F. Kennedy, JFK's brother and the U.S. Attorney General. Some sources say she had calls with both men just weeks before she died. The timeline is murky. What's confirmed is that she knew them both and that powerful people wanted those ties kept quiet. Around this time, her behavior changed. She made phone calls late at night. She told friends she felt watched. She once joked, "If anything happens to me, start with the White House." No one took her seriously. But her housekeeper, Eunice Murray, said Marilyn often got upset after long, private calls. She'd cry, pace, then go silent. The FBI's files on Marilyn weren't fully released until years after her death. But even in redacted form, they show how closely she was monitored and how deeply she was entangled in circles far beyond Hollywood. Not just a movie star, a liability. The final day, minute by minute. The 4th of August, 1962, started quiet. Marilyn stayed home in Brentwood. She had just bought the house 6 months earlier. It was the first home she ever owned. That morning, she spoke by phone with several people: her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, her publicist, and friends. She sounded off. Some said she was cheerful. Others said she sounded tired. Maybe both. Around 4:30 p.m., Dr. Greenson stopped by for an in-person session. He later said she was tense, but not alarming. After he left, her housekeeper, Eunice Murray, stayed behind. At 7 p.m., Marilyn talked on the phone with Joe DiMaggio's son. He said she seemed normal. Then she called Peter Lawford, brother-in-law to the Kennedys. She told him to say goodbye to his wife and warned, "Say goodbye to the president and say goodbye to yourself because you're a nice guy." He said her voice was slurred. Lawford panicked. He tried to call back. No answer. Meanwhile, Murray claimed she saw Marilyn go into her bedroom around 8 p.m. The light stayed on. The door locked. At 10 o'clock, Murray grew worried. She called Grinson, who returned just after midnight. He looked through the window and saw Marilyn lying face down. They broke in. Marilyn Monroe was found on her bed, nude, with a phone in one hand. There were empty pill bottles nearby, but no water glass, no note, no sign of struggle. Dr. Hyman Engelberg, her physician, was called to pronounce death. He listed the time as around 3:50 a.m., though exact timing has been debated. Police were called after that. When officers arrived, they noted inconsistencies in everyone's stories. Who called who first? When was she found? Why did they wait to alert police? There were no signs of forced entry, no trauma on the body, no clear timeline. She was 36. The cold, clinical autopsy. Dr. Thomas Noguchi performed the autopsy on the 5th of August, 1962, at the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office. He had examined famous bodies before, but this one came with pressure. The media was watching. So was the studio. So was Washington. The official cause of death, acute barbiturate poisoning. She had extremely high levels of nembutyl and chloral hydrate in her system, enough to kill several people. but something didn't line up. Her stomach was empty. No food, no pill residue, no traces of capsules. If she swallowed that many pills, something should have remained. Instead, the drugs were found mostly in her blood and liver. That detail triggered more questions than answers. Noguchi noted the strange absence, but the case was closed quickly. She had no signs of physical trauma. Her body was clean. No note was found. The press asked why. Dr. Greenson and Dr. Engelberg gave interviews saying Marilyn had been emotionally disturbed and deeply troubled. They pointed to her past intentional attempts, but close friends pushed back. Lee Strasberg and others said she had plans. She had meetings scheduled. She was about to restart filming Something's Gotta Give. There was also the matter of the cleanup. By the time police arrived, her bedroom had been tidied. Her laundry was done. Her phone logs were missing. Photographs taken at the scene didn't match descriptions given later. Details didn't fit, but no one pushed further. Her body was released quickly. She was embalmed the same day. In the decades since, theories have flooded the public. Accidental overdose, cover-up, assisted death. But the autopsy stayed official. The cause of death remained unchanged. A burial she didn't want. She didn't plan her funeral. She never thought she'd need to. After her death, 20th Century Fox kept quiet. The Kennedys said nothing. Studio executives distanced themselves. Her former husband stayed silent, except one. Joe DiMaggio took over. He handled every detail. He refused offers from Hollywood. He banned photographers. He kept the guest list small. Only close friends. No press. No producers. No Kennedys. He ordered white roses. 24 were placed on her bronze casket. He had them delivered 3 times a week to her grave for the next 20 years. The funeral took place at Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles, the 8th of August, 1962. A Wednesday. It was a Catholic service, even though she wasn't Catholic. Joe made that call. He wanted it simple. Private. Marilyn's body arrived in a closed casket. She wore a green Pucci dress and her favorite lipstick. The mortician who prepared her said her face looked peaceful but swollen. The embalming had been rushed. Lee Strasberg gave the eulogy. He called her a warm human being who never let her heart harden. She had left most of her estate to him. Outside the gate, thousands gathered. Fans held signs. Some cried. Others took photos. The crowd stretched for blocks, but inside it was quiet. Reporters tried to get quotes. None came. After the service, she was placed in crypt number 24 at the Corridor of Memories. A marble wall with her name and the years, 1926, 1962. Later, it came out that Marilyn had once told a friend she didn't want to be buried in Los Angeles. She wanted New York. But that didn't happen. She had no will for burial, no say in the end. Years later, Joe was asked if he blamed anyone for her death. He answered, yes. When pressed, he said, Hollywood. He never spoke at length about her again. There were no studio tributes, no national moment of silence, just a quiet, sealed goodbye for the most famous woman in the world, and a name carved in stone for a girl no one had protected.
In 1952, a single government memo revoked Charlie Chaplin's right to re-enter the United States. That same decade, Dalton Trumbo served 10 months in federal prison. Paul Robeson's passport was seized. 15 major stars were banned and erased, not by scandal, but by a system that punished anyone who knew too much and refused to stay silent. The paper trail that destroyed them still exists. A single government order could erase a career overnight. On October 23, 1952, the United States State Department issued a memo that barred Charlie Chaplin from re-entering the United States. The document cited moral turpitude and political unreliability, but offered no trial and no formal charge. Chaplin, then in London for a film premiere, was forced to settle in Switzerland. His American contracts collapsed within weeks. United Artists delayed distribution of his films, and the United States box office share for his next release dropped by nearly a third. Chaplin's legal appeals filed in 1954 were dismissed on national security grounds. He would not return to American soil for 2 decades. Dalton Trumbo's confrontation with Congress began in October 1947, when the House Un-American Activities Committee demanded he reveal his political associations. Trumbo refused. On November 25th, he was cited for contempt of Congress, and by April 1948, he entered the federal prison camp in Kentucky to serve a 10-month sentence. The official court docket, United States versus Trumbo, lists his conviction for contempt. Upon release, Trumbo's name vanished from studio credits. He worked in secret, writing under pseudonyms, while studios circulated internal memos warning producers not to hire anyone cited by Congress. The blacklist was enforced as absolute fact, not rumor. Paul Robeson faced a different form of erasure. On November 19, 1950, the State Department revoked his passport, citing activities contrary to the national interest. The original order preserved in Record Group 59 at the National Archives left Robeson unable to perform overseas. A scheduled European concert tour and a Broadway revival of Othello both collapsed. Robeson's legal challenge in 1956 was denied, and only after a diplomatic campaign did he regain his passport in 1958. By then, his film and stage prospects in the United States had withered. Sterling Hayden's case played out in the hearing room itself. On March 20, 1951, Hayden appeared before the House Un-American Activities Committee and, under pressure, named 6 former colleagues as Communist Party contacts. The transcript entered into the congressional record notes Hayden's willingness to cooperate. In return, he received a letter of cooperation and avoided contempt charges or imprisonment. But the cost was lasting. Hayden's reputation suffered, and for nearly a decade, he struggled to regain leading roles. In a 1970 interview, he publicly renounced his testimony, but the damage was done. Each of these actions, passport revocations, contempt convictions, and coerced testimony, was formalized in government records and court dockets. A single signature, a memo, or a transcript could silence even the most celebrated figures. The template was set. Federal authority could exile, imprison, or banish a star, and the industry would follow. Studios and unions soon adopted similar tactics, ensuring that official condemnation translated into total professional isolation. Studio discipline often began quietly, a single line in a casting file, a clause invoked, a union decision entered into the minutes. Dorothy Dandridge's experience after her 1954 Academy Award nomination for Carmen Jones reveals how internal paperwork could erase public promise. Warner Brothers memos from that spring show a sharp decline in proposed roles and salary offers. By summer, her name vanished from leading cast lists, replaced by notes citing market risk and public image concerns. Soon after, Dandridge was formally withdrawn from a major project. What had been a milestone became a pretext for exclusion. Orson Welles encountered a different form of control. In 1948, RKO executives issued a recut order for The Lady from Shanghai, removing Welles from post-production. Studio files from that period state that the director was to be removed from post-production and that all future cuts were to be approved by the studio head only. Welles received a terse memo, not a meeting. The finished film bore little resemblance to his vision. Over the next decade, similar memos followed him from studio to studio, each one narrowing his creative control and closing doors across Hollywood. Lee Grant's suspension by the Screen Actors Guild illustrates union enforcement. On June 30, 1952, the Screen Actors Guild Board passed a motion suspending Lee Grant from membership for a period of 30 days, effective immediately, on the grounds of non-cooperation with the Committee on Communism and for making public statements that contravene the Guild's policy of political neutrality. The decision, entered into the official minutes, came with a formal censure. Grant's membership was restored after 30 days, but the censure remained in her file, shadowing her career. Edward G. Robinson, once a leading man, issued a public apology in July 1952, saying he deeply regretted his past associations and affirmed his loyalty to the principles of American democracy. Despite this, casting memos show his roles shrinking, supporting parts replacing leads, his name moving down the call sheets. Ida Lupino, facing repeated rejections for feature directing contracts, pivoted in 1957. Directors Guild files document her shift to television, trading studio lots for smaller sound stages. Her adjustment ensured survival, but her ambitions as a feature director never fully recovered. Private decisions, memos, minutes, apologies, and contract pivots became tools of suppression. Choices made behind closed doors shaped careers and set boundaries for creative freedom across Hollywood. Zero Mostel's name was struck from television lineups in a single afternoon. On April 12, 1950, NBC circulated an internal memo: all scheduled network appearances to be canceled. No further bookings without senior-level review. The order cited his refusal to cooperate with congressional investigators. Within days, Mostel's bookings vanished from radio, television, and most major stage venues. The ripple effect was immediate. Sponsors withdrew, and theater managers followed suit. Mostel's only remaining platform became small New York stages, far from the national audience he once commanded. The machinery behind these bans operated with bureaucratic precision. In June 1950, Red Channels, a 213-page pamphlet, landed on the desks of network executives and theater owners across the country. The publication listed 151 names, including Mostel, Kim Hunter, Burgess Meredith, and Hazel Scott, labeling each as a security risk. The effect was chilling. A single entry in Red Channels could erase a career overnight. By summer's end, Hunter's scheduled live appearance on CBS was canceled. Her name flagged in meeting minutes dated May 18, 1952. The memo read, "Recommend removal from live program lineup, pending investigation." Burgess Meredith received a similar fate. On July 23, 1952, CBS issued a policy note to affiliates: refrain from booking Meredith for any live or recorded program until cleared by the legal department. Meredith's film and television roles dried up, forcing him to seek work in regional theater for the next several years. Hazel Scott's erasure was even more abrupt. NBC's Directive 50A, dated March 7, 1950, banned her from all network-owned stations, citing national security concerns. Scott's television show, one of the first hosted by an African-American woman, was canceled within days. Her name disappeared from broadcast schedules and nightclub marquees. These bans did not rely on rumor or backroom gossip. They were written orders, trade bulletins, and network directives, distributed quickly, enforced absolutely. Millions of listeners and viewers lost access to these artists in a matter of weeks. The blacklist extended far beyond the studio gate, reaching into every corner of American entertainment. Public silence became policy, and the microphone was cut for good. John Garfield's story closed with a signature and a death certificate. After refusing to cooperate with HUAC in May 1951, Garfield found his contracts revoked and his roles canceled. Paramount's letter, dated June 1951, withdrew him from a leading part, citing pending investigation. Within a year, stress and isolation took their toll. On May 21, 1952, Garfield died of a heart attack at age 39. The official certificate lists cardiac failure aggravated by chronic stress, a direct line from blacklist to early grave. Josephine Baker faced a different kind of erasure. In 1951, as she prepared for a Broadway return, the United States consulate denied her visa waiver. The denial, signed and stamped, forced her to remain in France. Hollywood contracts dried up. American producers replaced her at the last minute, incurring thousands in lost rehearsal costs. Baker's career pivoted permanently to Europe, where she built a new legacy on French stages and in civil rights activism, but her name faded from United States screens. Across the industry, the pattern repeated. Studio cancellation letters for Garfield, visa denials for Baker, and union censure files for others all pointed to a machinery designed for exclusion. Archive statistics show that by 1955, more than 200 actors, writers, and directors had lost work due to formal blacklist actions, each case backed by documentation. A canceled contract, a revoked passport, a lost credit. Death, exile, and reputational ruin became routine outcomes, not exceptions. The evidence is plain. What happened to Garfield and Baker was not isolated. It was the result of a coordinated system, one that left a trail of paper and a legacy of damaged lives. The machinery of erasure ran silently, but its impact remains written in every lost role, every vanished name, and every career that ended not with scandal, but with silence. These cases prove erasure isn't abstract. It is enforced by legal orders, studio contracts, and government bans. Today, industry power still decides who speaks and who disappears. Free expression in entertainment remains fragile, not guaranteed. The cost of defiance echoes on. Share your perspective in the comments below. On March 23, 1944, a King County judge signed a commitment warrant sending a Hollywood actress into the violent ward at Western State Hospital. She would not leave for nearly 7 years. Frances Farmer was just the first file in a pattern the studios tried to bury. Court orders, psychiatric holds, forced evaluations, careers quietly erased. The paper trail still exists, and it begins with one arrest in Santa Monica. Frances Farmer's collision with the system began on October 19, 1942, when Santa Monica police cited her for driving without headlights during a wartime dim-out. The arrest report listed her as combative, and the judge handed down a $500 fine with a 180-day suspended sentence. Within months, Farmer faced further legal trouble, including a notorious courtroom incident where she hurled an inkwell at the bench. The docket from King County Superior Court records the next step. On March 23, 1944, Judge William J. Frater signed a commitment warrant. 2 psychiatrists had testified to Farmer's legal insanity, citing agitation and paranoia. The court-appointed guardian waived her right to a jury trial. That same day, Farmer was transferred under guard to Western State Hospital in Steilacoom, Washington. The hospital ledger logged her admission directly into the violent ward, a placement reserved for those deemed dangerous or uncontrollable. Over the next several years, she cycled through periods of seclusion, forced treatments, and recommitment hearings. On May 21, 1945, Judge Hugh C. Todd ordered her return to Western State after a failed parole. Hospital records from this period reference the use of restraints and repeated observation notes. In March 1950, after nearly 6 years, parole paperwork authorized her release to her mother's custody. The formal discharge was signed March 25, 1951, though Farmer herself would not learn of her legal freedom until 2 years later. The paper trail, including police citations, court dockets, hospital logs, and parole orders, remains one of the most complete records of forced removal in Hollywood's history. Jean Tierney checked herself into the Menninger Clinic in Topeka, Kansas in 1947. The intake card lists her as a voluntary admission, seeking treatment for depression after the birth of her daughter Daria and the collapse of her marriage. Clinic bulletins from that period describe a protocol built around psychoanalysis, daily group sessions, and lengthy observation. Tierney remained at Menninger for nearly 18 months and was discharged in early 1949. The press, following the studio's lead, referred to her absence as a rest cure or nervous exhaustion, but Variety quietly dropped her from A-list casting sheets. After her release, Tierney returned to film in smaller roles. Her contract leverage diminished, and her name absent from major studio rosters. Veronica Lake's descent played out on the streets of Los Angeles. She was arrested twice in 1951 for public drunkenness, first in June, then again in September. She was processed at the Hollywood precinct and transferred each time to Los Angeles County General Hospital for a 72-hour psychiatric evaluation. LAPD logs and county evaluation forms confirmed the holds, which were triggered by disorderly conduct charges rather than a medical referral. Both times Lake was released after observation, but the pattern of arrests and mandated psychiatric assessments became fodder for the trade press. By the end of 1951, her studio contract was terminated, and her prospects for leading roles evaporated. In both cases, voluntary entry and short-term evaluation holds became career-ending events, with institutional records and trade dismissals documenting the quiet erasure from Hollywood's inner circle. Barbara Payton's fall began in 1951, when the Los Angeles Superior Court opened a felony assault docket after Tom Neal beat Francho Tone unconscious outside her apartment. Tone's injuries, a fractured cheekbone, a broken nose, a concussion, and a gashed lip, required weeks of hospitalization. Neal, found guilty of felony assault, walked away with a suspended sentence and a fine. Payton's name, splashed across every tabloid, became shorthand for scandal. Warner Brothers invoked her morals clause and canceled her contract. Within a year, she was blacklisted. By 1955, Payton's final film credit was behind her. Police records from that period show a string of arrests for passing bad checks and public intoxication. In 1956, a family court judge stripped her of custody of her son, citing immoral conduct and unwholesome activities. Payton's descent accelerated. She turned to prostitution on Sunset Boulevard and was often arrested for solicitation. No official record confirms psychiatric holds, but biographers and police sources describe repeated 72-hour detentions at Los Angeles County facilities from 1954 to 1956. By 1967, Los Angeles Police Department reports listed her as destitute, living on Skid Row, her health shattered by addiction. That May, she was found dead in a rundown San Diego apartment at the age of 39. The case file was closed with a single line that read, "Cause of death, heart and liver failure, chronic alcoholism." Between the 1930s and the 1950s, psychiatric care in the United States operated under a strict set of medical and legal rules. State hospitals like Western State in Washington County, psych wards in Los Angeles, and private clinics such as the Menninger Clinic in Kansas all relied on protocols that are now largely obsolete. Admission to a state hospital typically began with a petition from a family member, a police officer, or a judge. 2 physicians were required to examine the individual and certify a mental disorder severe enough to pose a danger or prevent self-care. With those certificates, a judge could issue a commitment warrant. Involuntary holds for observation often lasted 72 hours, and a court order could authorize months or even years of confinement. Treatments during this era were harsh by modern standards. Electroconvulsive therapy, known as ECT, was introduced in the United States in 1940 and rapidly became a mainstay for severe depression and mania. By the late 1940s, patients might receive dozens of ECT sessions during a single hospital stay. Lobotomy, first performed in 1936, was widely adopted across state hospitals by the end of World War II. More than 40,000 Americans underwent the operation between 1936 and 1951, with the majority of cases recorded in public institutions. Insulin coma therapy, another common intervention, involved repeated induction of comas using high doses of insulin, especially for schizophrenia. These treatments were often administered without patient consent. Physical restraints and seclusion were routine for those considered violent or uncontrollable. Straitjackets, locked rooms, and prolonged isolation appear in hospital ledgers and superintendent reports from the era. Annual reports from state facilities document daily use of such measures until the hygiene reforms of the late 1950s. Legal paperwork followed a predictable path: commitment petitions, medical affidavits, court orders, admission logs, and eventually discharge records. The two-physician rule and the 72-hour observation hold became standard across most states, shaping the files that survive today. The National Mental Health Act of 1946 began to shift funding toward outpatient care, but for most of Hollywood's golden age, the system funneled troubled individuals through a rigid process, one that left a clear bureaucratic trail but little room for personal agency. This framework governed every case that followed, from voluntary admissions at private clinics to forced removals by court order. Mary Astor's custody trial in August 1936 brought her private diaries into Los Angeles Superior Court, the judge ordering them as evidence. A psychiatric evaluation followed, Dr. Louis Dochet declaring her fit for custody, even as headlines speculated about her mental health. The transcript stands as a rare official record of a star's forced examination under judicial order. Peg Entwistle vanished from casting sheets after RKO cut her scenes from 13 Women in September 18, 1932. The Los Angeles County Death Notice, dated September 18, 1932, lists her suicide from the Hollywoodland sign, the corner referencing industry disappointment. No hospital admission exists, but the file marks her disappearance through official channels. Alida Valli's name appears in Italian court files from the Montesi case, May 1953. Questioned for hours about alleged ties to the scandal, Valli was described in the press as suffering a nervous collapse. Family arranged medical supervision, and her Lux film contract dissolved quietly. The Montesi dossier, stamped with her name, documents a career altered by legal and medical intervention. Frances Faye's nightclub career ended abruptly in 1938 after a violent outburst at a Wilshire club. The Los Angeles County Cabaret Commission's commitment ledger records her transfer to a private sanitarium for observation and rest. Within months, her name vanished from club listings, Variety noting her absence. The ledger records a period of observation and enforced withdrawal from the scene. Frances D's withdrawal from filming is logged in a 1945 RKO studio memo citing nervous exhaustion. The memo refers to a brief Hollywood clinic evaluation. No formal commitment followed. Dee returned to work in 1946, but the memo reveals how paperwork could quietly sideline a star. Billy Dove's 1932 retirement was announced in the press, citing health concerns. Studio correspondence hints at psychological strain, with Dove declining further contracts. No hospital record survives, but the retirement notice marks her public exit. Frances Bergen's 1937 admission card from a Los Angeles care facility lists her under her maiden name, noting temporary care for emotional fatigue. She was released a week later, her modeling career resuming, but the institutional record remains. Lila Lee's 1931 arrest ledger documents her booking on morals charges, followed by transfer to a private hospital for detoxification. The discharge summary, filed 2 weeks later, closes the official record. Lee's career never fully recovered. Court files, hospital records, and faded studio contracts still hold the evidence. Today, the machinery that once erased these women's names from marquees is quieter, but not gone. The line between crisis and disappearance remains thin, and in Hollywood, erasure is always just one signature away.